And in the Uteland Butte, which is the largest and most economic play in the Uinta Basin right now, of course, it has both a technical boundary and an economic boundary. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that and what makes it. So when we talk about play boundaries, usually we break them into two pieces. We have technical play boundaries, which would be where you can still get significant volumes of oil and gas in a well. And this is going to depend on typical petroleum geology topics, such as stratigraphy, your source rock, its maturity. But when we talk about economic play limits, this is very different, of course. This is where operators can drill wells that meet internal rate of return metrics. And this is much more complex. It's going to be the flow rates and what you project they're going to be, what your well costs are going to be, what the current oil price is, marketing constraints for that oil, and what your current cost of capital is for your company. And getting your technical play limits right is important. But it's a lot more important to get to these economic play rights, these economic play limits done. And so what is it for the Uinta Basin? Well, in 2019, out here in the Uinta Basin, no one had heard of COVID yet. Skinny jeans were still cool. And we of what the technical play boundaries were for the Uteland Butte play. You see a large number of wells out here that recovered significant volumes of oil around the play. But the economic boundaries were pretty small, maybe 9 townships. All this technical play boundary, the economic boundary was not super huge. Now, 2022, well, oil this year, of course, hit $100 for about 10 minutes. Mullets came back for some reason, which I still don't understand. And the technical play boundaries for the Uteland Butte have not changed. What we understand for the technical play boundaries is very much what it was years ago. But the economic plays are expanding and expanding significantly. And it's up to 13 townships and growing. And so what we're going to talk about in this talk is what is expanding on that play and how much more can we expect it to grow. If we look at IPs, not just cumulative production, we actually see that these boundaries that we defined in the previous slide hold exactly the same. They still fit nicely in 2019 and 2022. And if you look where all the current rigs are in Uinta Basin, those are the yellow stars there, just to make it more visible. They fit in those same boundaries that we previously defined for today. So why would anybody care about that? Well, in the Uinta Basin, in the Uteland Butte, the economic and technical factors that are enlarging the economic play boundaries, these factors include, facies changes in the Uteland Butte. What the existing 30,000 wells out there have done for depletion, faulting out there, maturity and pressure, reservoir temperature and oil viscosity, very important with the Uinta wax. And then what our controlling agencies are doing to us and how hard it is to get things permitted and drilled in an economic way. State versus tribal versus federal agency. Marketing story is for an isolated basin like the Uinta Basin. None of these factors are unique to Uinta Basin. So things that might be learned here and of course can be applied in most basins anywhere. So what is this? Well, it's a big basin. At least you're going to walk across it, 3,300 square miles. We've got a lot of logs that are included in this. I did pull a lot of production data in. We're going to look at some of that. And what we're looking at is a large stack of oil saturated rocks, something like 2,200 feet. And what we're doing today are drilling 2-mile-long laterals, like much of the industry. And Uteland Butte is what we're going to focus on. So where are we? Well, the Uteland Butte is going to be limited just by the nature that it's a freshwater Luncheon system. It's in an isolated basin and was an isolated system to begin with. So yes, very limited. And this 2,200 thick section of these oil saturated rocks And really, we're just looking right here at the bottom of it. You expand that out, and it's just a nice, rich carbonate stack of oil-saturated rocks. It represents something like 1 million years of stratigraphy back in the Eocene, and is composed of a succession of interbedded limestone, dolostones, calcareous mudstones, siltstones, sandstones on the far side of the, or south side of the basin. It's conformable, well, the basin top. On the base, you got the Wasatch Formation. On the top, you got the Castle Peak Formation. And it's intensely conformable. So if you take a cross section and run it out to outcrop here at the Colorado border, you know, just build just what's out of gamma ray logs, you see how intensely correlatable this section of rock is. And you can take it right to the outcrop and identify each one of the units that you see across the basin. That's 61 miles across. So let's talk about the margins, what form the different margins. If you look at where we've had successful Uteland Butte wells drilled, they form a nice broad arc of development. And it's not just Uteland Butte, but all lower Green River horizontals fit in that arc of development. If you look at within the Uteland Butte and map that out, see it fits in that same arc of horizontal wells in development. If you look where you have map pressure, now of course pressure data is dirty, so you know kind of wherever you can find it, but it fits in that same limit to the arc boundary. And then maybe, you know, much more data dense map would be looking at sonic slowness. So this is just an average sonic travel time through the Uteland Butte. And you see north of this line, you have low values. This means the rocks are much faster. South of this line, the values, this is just microseconds per foot, are much, much slower. They're slower because we've got a lot of organic material. We got a lot more overpressure. And this has decreased the, you know, think of the grain coupling up within the rock and slowed our sonic travel times through that rock. And it defines the northern boundary of the Uteland Butte Play very well. If you look and just map, do an isopac map of sandstones within the Uteland Butte, those correlate with each other very well. You see the sonic travel times, they're slow in the Uteland Butte. As soon as you start picking up sands, of course, those sonic travel times pick up very, very quickly. So all the data are responding to real geologic features. So what are these features here in this northern side? Well, we have what we call the Wasatch Wash, because we like to try and rhyme out there. The Wasatch Wash is just a bunch of clastic material that's washed directly out of mountains. I spent the last couple of days over at Justin Birdwell at the USGS Core Lab, and I suggest everybody take advantage of that. It's an amazing and free resource. You know, go to the CRC whenever you get the chance, because even if you feel you know the rocks, of course, you're going to know them so much better looking at those cores. And we pulled a core right through here, and it was amazing the red paleosols and conglomerates that we see in this Wasatch Wash, just a couple of miles from nice clean carbonates to the south.
Right.
When yes,
we don't see your mouse.
Oh,
So you might just
I see my mouse. It looks great. No, sorry. So we pulled this core right here, and just a couple of miles from where you have really well-developed carbonates here in the Uteland Butte. It is red paleosols, it's conglomerates, it's very high energy clastic rocks. When this lake flipped and you got all these clastics pouring in, it flipped fast, and that carbonate factory, that carbonate system completely shut down. So the Uteland Butte does pinch out on that northern margin of the basin. It's replaced by these coarse sandstones and gravels washed out of the Uinta Mountains, and includes hyperpignites. Hyperpignites in core are beautiful, just perfect Balma sequences. Gilbertian deltas, nice gravel deltas that come at a high angle right into the lake, and braided channels. So if you look at just another one of these pseudoseismograms, and you take it north and south across the basin, you see this quite well, where you have nice thickly developed carbonates. The carbonate system starts to get poisoned by having more cloudy water from the clastics coming in from the north, and then is completely replaced by these coarse clastics on the northern side. So if we start looking at what kind of boundary we have for different zones, we take the Uteland Butte, which would be this red line right here to the blue. This is classic Uteland Butte. And you look at this green curve, that is your sonic travel time. Anywhere that green curve is displaced, well, that's because it's being slowed down by higher pressured organic porosity right in the Uteland Butte. Here where it's barren, these are barren carbonated railroad tracks for your sonic. In the Uteland Butte where you have all that organic material, all the organic porosity in this area, it's displaced to the left. That would be this flow right here where the Uteland Butte's well developed, very slow sonic travel times. But let's see if this same border goes across for all these zones. So we got a nice border for Uteland Butte. What if I go down to this next carbonate down here? Now, if you talk to somebody from EP or if you're to talk to Dave Schmoody, he'd tell you that this is called the ostracod. I've always wondered about that, Dave, because there's ostracods in every single rock. But if you take this TF1, as I call it sometimes, and it looks similar, but notice that it doesn't have near as much TOC. So the values aren't as high, the microseconds per foot, but the boundary is roughly the same as Uteland Butte. It's responding to very similar system and has that same boundary. You're not going to go any further north to TF1 than you are with the Uteland Butte. But let's take the TF00. This is the maximum flooding surface for the lower Green River system. That's lakes far north is going to be, and you can see that its values, its sonic travel time values, are much higher than either the Uteland Butte or the TF1. It's not super thick. We're talking maybe 25, 30 feet of it, but it's very, very rich. This has the highest TOCs that I get in this lower Green River system here in the Uteland Butte. And if I look at its line of depth here on the north side, I see that it's about an extra DSU further north. So if I target this very rich maximum flooding surface, maybe I can go further north. Maybe I can make that boundary go further north. So here's this Wasatch Wash. Red are these very coarse plastics coming in, and you have paleosols and different things that you see where my ice pack sands, my ice pack of sands of the Uteland Butte. You also see where the conventional development has been. So if you were an up-and-coming geologist in the 1970s, this is where you came to burn down rig, incredibly overpressured rock. They drill in this stuff, encounter fractures, and it would blow and go at 1,000 or 2,000 barrels a day. Shell had a very famous well right here where they were coring. This is the Brinkerhoff 1 rig, second cousins of my dad, where they were coring it and managed to blow the core out the stack. They had core raining down. That's where you wear a hard hat all over the place. And before they could get it under control, 36 hours later, the whole thing caught fire and burned the rig down. So yeah, there's been a lot of production out here. Some of these bigger bubbles are 3 million barrel vertical wells, but you see that vertical production coincides where you got sand. They're looking for the conventional targets, looking for the sand. They're looking for this stuff. That becomes important to us because we're wanting to drill this horizontally now and make this a modern unconventional target. And we know that this stuff's been perfed all over the place. We know that this stuff works. These wells out here in the middle of the Uteland Butte play, they're commonly coming on at 1,000 to 3,000 barrels a day. They're making between 700 and 1 million barrels EURs. I mean, they're great wells. So thumbs up for that. And we come down here and let's play northward into this Wasatch Wash. We know we got some nice sandstone reservoirs. It seems like that ought to work. And we know that TF00 extended north several more miles and was a great generative system. Well, let's look at it. Let's look at frac hits. Of course, everybody knows what frac hit is. We tend to simplify things. When I think of fracs and how fracs work, and useful way to think about it is water flowing downhill. Your frac fluid is going to flow down gradient into lower pressured rock. Wherever it can go down gradient is where that frac is going to go. And when you have existing, when it's virgin rock, usually that's going to be up. It's flowing up where it has lower pressure. So 2/3 of your frac fluid usually is going upwards. If there's any kind of depletion, existing production in the area, of course, down gradient is going to be towards the depletion. And it tends to make you sad where you're producing more water in your well that got hit and less oil. Now, by far the most expensive part of a modern well that we drill, about 2/3 of the cost, is the frac job. We're commonly putting away many millions of pounds of sand, many millions of gallons of water in every one of these laterals. And so if you're spending that money to pump that water and sand into an already depleted rock, that energy is not going in to the high pressured rock that you're wanting to stimulate. You're not going to build the net pressure up enough to be able to stimulate the rock you want. Instead, you just damage that existing well, and you spend a lot of money to create a well that won't produce very much. So, do we have examples of this in Uinta Basin? Well, you bet. Zimby, can we make fun of EP without anybody? Good. So these are, I'm online. Well, this is an unnamed company on the west side of the basin. And, we appreciate it when other people experiment and then we can use that data so I don't have to do it. And what they did is this unnamed company drilled 2 wells right off the same pad, and they were directly one on top of the other. There's no horizontal offset on these wells. One was a very typical Uteland Butte. The other, they came down to a common, some people call it the Wasatch 5. Other people that use better nomenclature call it the TF12. And the TF12 here is surrounded by pretty good sandstones. Got a lot of good reservoir around it. And both these wells had defits. The defits are good because we got data on what the existing pore pressure is of the rock. And both the defit in the Uteland Butte and in the TF12 came back as virgin pressure depletion in these carbonates where they're targeted. So great, we can drill this, we can develop this. So what they did, and then to finish up, it doesn't look great on the screen, but these black stars were existing vertical wells. It was in a part of the basin that had a large number of vertical conventional wells drilled in the 70s and 80s. And both these computed similar amounts of oil in place, similar measured pore pressure to those defits, and had similar frac jobs performed on both. However, in the first 6 months of production, this well produced 186,000 barrels, and this one only half as much. So if it had the same pressure and had the same amount of oil in place, why the vast difference in production values? Well, it is because of these sandstones around it. Those sandstones had been targeted by all these vertical wells. They had a lot of depletion in those sandstones. So even though this limestone itself was at full pressure, these sandstones weren't. So they started pressuring out this well to frack it. They initiated a frac, and those fracs immediately went into these depleted sandstones. Those took much of the frac energy away, and they weren't able to get a good, effective frac on all that rock. Since they had a lot of permeability, had a lot greater permeability in the carbonates, more depletion, and that fluid traveled down gradient into those sandstones. Most of that well never built up enough net pressure to fracture the virgin reservoir effectively. And so these small volume wells, these weren't big vertical wells, but they were enough to really screw up this frac job and keep that well from producing very well. And just because I love a gimmick, I brought some balloons. And I'm gonna blow up a balloon here for a second. So you're just blowing pressure into an elastic system. And that system is going to absorb that to a point until it gets to a point where it exceeds its elastic preference, and I can't pump it. And you'll frack that rock. Now, this well here had an issue. That it was the same rock it was before, but had all these existing wells in it. And the rocks were the same. No, con gusto. I mean, like, yeah. No, like you want to. And the problem is, you're just not able to build the net pressure up to get an effective frac job. And that's exactly, I should silence my phone. Not able to build up enough net pressure to really make that well frac effectively. So what does that mean to us? Well, these rocks, some places do have a lot of oil and all this depletion around it. In those high perm rocks, you're never going to get a modern frac job off. Those depleted zones are going to wreck your frac job. You're not going to be able to build the net pressure up to get a good frac off on even rocks that are still full of oil. You know, this would be your TF00 where there is a lot of oil in place at high pressure, but it's high pressure now. The frac's not going to go into that higher pressure. It's going to go down gradient. So you'll never be able to get it stimulated very effectively. And results are projected to be very poor if you're to try to do that. So that's a no. So this is what we call a hard play boundary, where I do not expect the horizontal play of the Uteland Butte to go any further north. But hey, there's still a whole nother basin out there. So what are the soft play boundaries to the south? You see a large number of wells that have been drilled here. They're pretty good wells. You have actually some wells down here that have done okay, and then a lot that don't seem to produce much at all. So what are the soft play boundaries? Well, let's look at the oils that we produce here. Here in the north, we tend to have very bright yellow waxes. These are where they've been subjected to enough thermal stress that all the asphaltenes have converted over to paraffins. And so you have a 98%, in some cases, paraffin, pure paraffin wax, very clean. Whereas to the south, it's got a much higher percentage of asphaltenes. It gives it a dark color. And so you have this gradient where you go from light colored on the north to very dark colored black on the south. You lay it on a subsea structure map, and you can see what the maturity is coming across that just based on the color. The further up dip you go, further to the south, the darker and more asphaltene rich the oil is. These are the less thermally mature oils, of course. And the Uinta waxy crudes have a thermal boundary where you're not going to be able to move it anymore. If you get to the south, there will get lower and lower temperatures. This is the reservoir temperature, and I don't know if you can see this, but 160 degrees F, 170, 130 way down here in the blue. And these waxes suffer from higher viscosities at lower temperatures. If you are still at 160 degrees or better, well, that's okay. Those will still flow. Your viscosity is not terrible. You get below 150, and it's not okay. This is in logarithmic scale, and you're coming very quickly up to very, very high viscosity as you come to the south, where it will not flow. So to produce at economic rates in these higher viscosity areas, you either have to have a lot more permeability or a lot more pressure. And really, you kind of have to see it to believe it. Brought a couple samples. You guys can hand these around. But it's one of those where, you can do whatever you want. The viscosity of these things are such that until you get it around 100 degrees, I once did this to a girl at Phillips Catholic Schools. I thought it was a great demonstration, but it was a mid-January day. It was cold. They had their room like 100 degrees. I did this and dumped the oil all over. But you can imagine what the viscosity is on this as your reservoir gets cooler and cooler. Something like 150 degrees is what I put as a boundary beyond which I don't care how good your reservoir is. The viscosity of this high paraffin crude is going to be such you're not going to be able to economically move it to the wellbore. And so what does this look like in practice? Well, if you take some wells and you normalize them with a similar size frac job where you're getting something like 1,000 barrels a day IP, which is pretty common out here, they're going to have very different decline curves. Here, where I have something like a 0.7 pressure gradient, and I'm sitting at 90-degree temperature, reservoir temperature, these things decline very, very slowly because I don't have to use so much energy to push oil from further away. I get a much lower decline curve. As I go further south, of course, I am using a lot more energy. I'm reaching bubble point much quicker, and these things decline much harder the further south you go. So even where I can make these wells work, I'm going to have lower EURs to the south in that lower pressured rock. So it becomes something of an economic play where you're going to have to see what is my oil price and how much am I paying to actually get that oil out. And, Uinta Basin, like everywhere else, is strongly tied to oil price. You see both rig activity and the amount of oil we're producing out there almost mirrored by what the current oil price is. And so I can map out what these soft play boundaries are. If I take down here, this would be down dip, my deepest, best rock here in the darker green. And I take the Uteland Butte. This is an isopack of thickness of the Uteland Butte, so you kind of see where the Uteland Butte is developed, of the carbonates. In my tier 1 acreage, anywhere in this, I can make that Uteland Butte work, down to $50, and in some places, much below $50 a barrel, WTI. Coming south, really, if I'm going to make it work in this band, substantially above 50, I probably need 75, and I need to feel confident it's going to stay there for quite some time. And if really I'm going to get this last tranche way out here far to the south, I need to feel comfortable that it's going to be at $100 a barrel and stay there. Or I can just drill more wells up here and pocket the difference. So this is what I mean by a soft play boundary, where it is very much decided by what your economic is going to be, your price. Now, of course, improved stimulation technology can improve returns and move these back and forth, but it's still going to be a similar concept, even if those lines do move with maybe cheaper drilling or better frac jobs. Of course, having more infrastructure and cheaper infrastructure also can make it cheaper and make those things move. So what is the Uteland Butte's future out here? Well, we continue to downspace and get better at wine racking. We used to have, of course, one main target. You now see about 4 different targets in the Uteland Butte being drilled. And with those different targets in that vertical section, we're able to get the horizontal spacing between wells tighter and tighter just with that better wine racking. So we're going to see that continue and get more effective depletion in the core of the play. And I don't expect those technical limits of the play to really move. We know where we can make oil move in this. Now, what can we do for the economic boundaries and bring more and more of that into the economic core of the play, southern side? The expansion of this play will be to the south along that ramp, where we can make more and more of this marginal rock work over time. We just published a book out of the UGA on a lot of these topics. I encourage not to compete with the mountain geologists. Think of it as a good brother to the mountain geologists. But you can find this on the UGA website, and it really is a good volume. We're quite happy with it. And that's all I got, but I'm available for questions. Oh.
Hey, Riley, can you speak to the capacity of the Salt Lake City refineries to process the waxy crude? And is there a volumetric limit? Can operators just drill willy-nilly, or are they constrained by how much capacity the refineries have?
Great question, and that's.
Can you summarize the questions for the people online?
Yeah. So the question was: is there a capacity limit in the Salt Lake City refineries? And so let me give a little background to that. So we're producing fairly unique crude where it's almost all paraffin. Now that has actually some benefits when it comes to cracking that to distillates, like diesel or jet fuel or gasoline. We actually get a massive yield. Yielded for most of the yellow wax, like 2 gallons of distillate for every gallon of wax. Now, we're not breaking the laws of thermodynamics, wax is the same or even less, but the volume goes up as we break these paraffin chains down. And so the yield is great. The problem we have is you can't put that through a pipeline with that low pour point. And so historically, we sent it all to Salt Lake. About 55 to 60% of the Salt Lake City's, they call it, refining area has as its feedstock Uinta Basin wax. And we could only have so much consumption in that if you're only going to use 55. They like to use other inputs as part of that. So we had Canadian crude, mostly in some Wyoming. So we had some hard boundaries on how much we could bring in. And historically, that has caused some major price blowouts to happen for the Uinta Basin wax. The last 3 to 5 years after the last really nasty price blowout, there's been a lot of work to develop more capacity in Carbon County, where we take it by rail to the Gulf Coast, and a significant volume. So we make, in my company, we make something like 15,000 barrels a day. We're probably sending 2/3 of that to the Gulf Coast at this point. And Exxon really likes it for the above mentioned reasons, and it makes a nice lubricant. Historically, you'd use it whenever you're feeling just a little unwell, and it'd clean you out effectively. I haven't tried it personally, but the market, once we get to the Gulf Coast, we actually get a promote on it, something like a 10% promote on it. But it's the transportation that makes it tougher to get there. So we don't have the hard ceiling we used to, but we still have normal technical challenges that we have to take it over a 9,000-foot pass to get it to Carbon County to the railroad. And in the winter, that gets kind of exciting. So there is something more of a soft, where how many trucks can you get across economically?
Question in the chat for you.
Yeah. The question is, please explain the difference in well azimuths. Some are north-south and some are east-west. Is there a type of stress regime? And yes, there is. So that's a great question. So you can see it. All right. So there we go. There's a lot here I haven't posted on this. You're trying to simplify it down for a presentation. But there's a series of faults here, the chain fault zone. You got a big series of faults, of course, related to that. And it turns out that Utah is heavily influenced by how much California wants to get away from us. For the last 12 million years, California has been extending itself westward, and that's put all of the ancient Cordilleran, Rockies Cordilleran, into extension. And that extension is most famously exposed in Utah in the Wasatch Fault. But that extension comes across into the Uinta Basin to about right here, where all of this is an east-west extension, whereas this part of the basin still has relic laramide stress. And where we got that relic north-south, northwest, southeast laramide stress, we tend to drill it north-south. Where we have it in east-west extension, of course, we have to drill perpendicular to those are laydowns. And there's a lot of complexity on that, but so far, these wells that have been drilled as laydowns have worked pretty well. Early on, Newfield did some stand-ups a little further west than they should have, and those well results suffered from it. So it is important to get them oriented correctly with this stress regime. Yeah.
When you're wine racking these wells, what's the vertical separation and what's the horizontal separation?
Oh, it's actually, so there's a paper I put in that last volume that goes through different pore systems with Uteland Butte, because they changed quite a bit. On the north side, we're steep. It's really dominated. The pore systems are by organic porosity. Further south, it's by dolomites, things of that nature. And where you wine rack and how you wine rack it really kind of depends where you are in the basin. But just, some rule of thumbs, I'll go up to it. Well, that's not great. Well, here we go. Let's use this guy. When you are trying to get as much recovery as you can, you don't want to have your wells that are alongside each other to be in the same bed. It helps to have them offset. So even if they're not offset vertically enough to be out of their frac zone, they still will have better depletion than if they were in the same bed. So what's being tried is, of course, C bench and V bench have long been good targets. Both these have historically been the main targets. But what most people are doing now is we put some in the TF1 here, and then the one alongside it, 900 feet on the side, will be up here in the very top of the Uteland Butte, or even the basal carbonates of the Castle Peak. And then you'll have the next one here in the C bench, and then down here in the TF1 again. And so you're trying to get them offset, even if it's only by 80 feet, to be able to just get them a little bit closer together, and you get better recovery from your DSU. Any other questions? Yeah, Ron.
I noticed in your abstract you say that this is the most important beginner. What is the Goldilocks zone that you custard carbonates have that the rest of it?
Repeatability.
Really, it makes it.
Repeat the question for your.
Yeah, sorry. What I said, the Uteland Butte is our preferred target, or at least the most economic target in the Uteland Butte. And so what makes it so special? And in this case, it's just that it's so, I can, over a broad area, really correlate my results. And since the rocks are so similar, it becomes my engineering inputs that make a difference on how well the results are. And that makes it really easy to plan my wells. It makes it really easy to engineer to a tight downspace effectively. So Castle Peak, great target up here. People making a lot of great wells by drilling this long point bed and fracking into classics up here and then high TOC shales up here. But it's really chaotic, because when these sands are well developed, you got a great well, and sometimes when they're not, your well's not so great. The Wasatch, same thing, a lot of sands, and you can deplete those sands over a broad area and know where I can downspace and not worry about some depleted sands. The Butte, even when there's a lot of vertical wells around, just haven't been depleted. And so it's very repeatable, whether I had vertical development or not, and whether I have an older horizontal, some distance away or not. And that repeatability and that lack of risk just make it so much easier. Now, the biggest haven't been Uteland Butte. Biggest wells in the basin have been, some of these guys that got in there early and drilled just some massive Wasatch wells, where they hit both some nice, but also some sands that were completely undepleted, and it just comes out of hard and fast. But if I have to choose between having one or two really good wells every once in a while, or having a program that's very repeatable and low risk, and I'm going to go with that repeatable, high value project. Any other questions? Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate you letting me come.